If you're still letting your team handle every repetitive task in your business, you're starting to get left behind. I've helped multiple 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses automate operations, save time, scale their business without needing to hire more staff, all without sacrificing quality. So if I wanted to start automating my business in 2025, this is exactly what I'll be doing. When most people get started in automating their business, they jump into tools like Zapier, NAN, Make.com, and they try to use these tools to build out instant solutions that aren't really ever going to solve a real problem. They expect results right away. They don't put the legwork in to understand what the bottlenecks are in their business, and then ultimately they just end up adding tools to their current stack, which only complicates things further. The thing is, automation isn't about tools. It's about systems that talk to each other in order to get an outcome that solves some sort of pain point, bottleneck, or manual task that is happening within the business. The key part of this is if you don't start with the right foundation, you don't understand your current processes, the rest of it is just going to fail. Everyone knows that when you're scaling a business, you need to make sure your operations are down to a T, because as you start to scale, those operations that aren't quite working correctly will only get bigger, the gap will increase, and that problem will become more prominent. In this video, I wanted to walk you through the top 3 areas that I would look to automate and what steps you need to follow in order to get things on track with AI in 2025, depending on whether you are $1 million per year business or you're just getting started. Number 1 is to start with an audit. Now, a lot of people think an audit is just some piece of paper that says you could do this or you could try that. The real value on doing an audit is you actually fully understand the business. So you understand the processes, you understand what your staff members are doing, you understand what tasks are being repeated across the board, whether it's from a manager role, a C-suite position, receptionist that you've got in the company, data entry manager. An audit allows you to have an in-depth analysis on the business, work out where time is being wasted, what tasks are constantly being done that you could potentially automate, and you can map everything out within the business from reaching out to a client, onboarding that client, working with that client, delivery, operations, finance, and then you can work out what is slowing down sales or what staff members you've got that are on $100 per hour, but they're doing $15 per hour tasks. Once you map everything out and you understand where time's being wasted, what solutions you could possibly implement, you need to work out what the 3 highest ROI builds are going to be. What I mean by that is a lot of companies will go in and they will start straight away with trying to do 8 different automations at once. They'll try and automate every single part of the business. When companies do this, they often get overwhelmed with how many builds they can do. They don't quite link them all in with one another, which means they don't really talk to each other and they haven't got a continuous operation. What you first need to do is find the operations that are either going to directly save time, increase money, or save money. This could be things like lead follow-up templates. This could be automated proposals. It could be data entry that your current staff members are doing, all the way through to lead generation, onboarding, and even the back-end finances and admin within the business. If you've found that there's a particular bottleneck in the business, for example, it's taking too much time to get your invoices into Xero, reconciled in Stripe, and then move that through, and it's taken a team member way too long to do that, that could be your first point in terms of an automation that is going to generate an ROI in terms of getting your time back. Once you've worked out the top 3 automations, that's when you need to look into building them, scaling them, and finding out how you can get them to talk to each other so you can actually deploy them within the business. The important thing about starting to build is you are always going to come back and change things. You're going to want to improve things over time. So you need to make sure it's built in a modular way so you can attach elements to it. You can make it future-proof, and you can also improve it in the future as the business scales, as your operations scale, and as you need to automate more processes. We always work with companies and they want to start with 1 or 2 things. They get excited when they see them working, and then they have all these other ideas that they want to start implementing. The problem with doing that is if you build these automations in a particular way that you can't then plug other tools into them, you're only going to find yourself spending a lot more time trying to rearrange what you've already built in order for it to connect to other areas in the business and build an ecosystem. Once starting to build your automations, you want to use tools like Make.com and NAN. You also then want to have a data management repository system, which could be something like Airtable. This can be where you add all of your data. You don't necessarily use it within the business, but it's a way that the AI and the automations can get that data from a particular database where they can show it in a particular way. They can pull things, they can add things, which means we'll then store everything in one place. So all of the AI tools can plug into it and get relevant information that they need, which means you don't need to pull data out of other CRMs you've got, other tools. Everything goes into one database, and that database connects to all the other automations. You then need to make sure that all your automations are labeled. You've got notes, you have documentation, so you know that if you build an automation and come back a month later to improve it, you know which node and module is doing what, you understand how it flows, you've got the documentation documentation or the SOPs to match what exactly is happening in the automation. So if you then want to go and improve it, make changes, add additional steps, you know where those steps need to be added and you already know exactly what's going on. Trust me when I say, if you start to build larger automations, if you come back in a couple of weeks' time, it's very easy to forget what each node was doing, which means you've then got to spend a lot more time going back through your old build just to understand what they connect to, what they're talking to, how they operate. Building out documentation means that if you want to jump back into the automation, you can change things, you know what's doing what, but it also means if you bring other people into the business to help with automations, they've got a clear example and document on what that automation is doing, the tools it connects to, and the outcome that it is giving. Once you've been able to glue these steps together, you then have the roadmap and the blueprint, the framework to go ahead and do this on a continuous basis. We often speak to companies on a bi-weekly basis to see what has changed, if there are any operational changes, if any of their staff members have identified a possible bottleneck, something in the business that may be looked to automate. Because as I've said before, once you start automating, you start to think in an autonomous way where that might be able to be automated, or you have a little look at this task, can that be automated? And you very quickly want to automate every single part of the business, which is great, but you need to make sure you do it in a strategic way. You understand the ROI, you understand how to build it, you understand the documentation that goes along with that particular build, as well as making sure it is built in order to scale, because as you do grow the business, you are going to want to automate more things. The issue is not knowing where to start is the hardest part. Every business has a different bottleneck, every business has a different process, and different staff members doing different things. This will then more often than not send someone down the wrong path in order to fix a problem that didn't need to be fixed, try and automate something that isn't necessarily a priority. We've worked with companies who will come to us and say they want to automate X, but when we actually look into their processes, it's only going to save such a minute amount of time. It's not something they should be prioritizing, and we look into what their other operations are doing and build them something slightly different. Choosing the wrong thing to automate in the first place can waste hours and thousands of dollars in doing so because you're not fixing anything, you're almost putting something off. What makes it worse is you're not going to really see a huge ROI from that build. The problem with that is you would have spent a lot of money, you wouldn't have seen a desired outcome, which means you're then not going to want to automate anything else because you have the perception it didn't work. That's why 95% of businesses at the moment who are trying to implement AI are failing and then giving up. It's fundamentally because they are not automating the right tasks, they are jumping the gun and they are trying to build something that they think looks fancy, where sometimes they need to look at the boring tasks because that's where you seal the real ROI. That is exactly why we offer one-to-one audits specifically on your business, where together we'll map out your automation opportunities, calculate where the highest ROI would be, whether that's saving time, reducing the hours that staff members are spending on wasted tasks, and show you exactly what you should be automating first. If getting a custom audit on your business sounds like something you'd be interested in, click the link below to book in your free alignment call and we'll see if your business is a good fit. And if you'd rather explore other solutions or how to find some of the bottlenecks in your business yourself, you can click one of my recent videos here, which will give you a rundown on how to find bottlenecks and identify what is wasting a lot of your staff's time.